Today I'm going to be fixing an issue with the lights not working on my under cabinet range hood. This is a Presenza model. I believe that's very similar to either a Newtone or a Braun under cabinet range hood. The light switch, as you can see, does nothing, will not turn on the lights. I already know that the switch here is defective, this keyboard switch, because we initially had the problem where the lights would stay on and when you would turn it off they wouldn't shut off. I also tried using a little bit of this, some electronics cleaner, and spraying it just on the side of the switch to see if I could get that to free up, because the grease from the stove is going to rise up and eventually inside the contacts are going to get all gummed up. However, using the electronics cleaner, it started to make the switch work better, but it still wasn't 100%, so I sprayed a little more in, and I'm not afraid to admit, I'll tell you guys my mistake here, is I probably sprayed a little too much in, and I touched the fan switch right next to it, which engaged the fan, and out of the side it went and blew a little flame out the side. So therefore I would recommend probably not using anything like this to try to clean the switch, because you could start a fire. First step, I'm going to turn off the electricity of this. You don't want to be working on this and start taking this all apart with the electricity on. If you don't know how to do that, you're not comfortable with that, it's probably best to just leave it to a pro and have a pro do the job for you. Here you can see the lights. There's one on each side just to further demonstrate the switch does not do anything anymore. Probably due to excessive spraying, trying to get it on the side of the switch to see if I could free up those contacts and get it working again. Can't really get it in besides the switch because through the hole here there's a little bit of a flange around the switch, so the spray doesn't really get inside the switch. It just runs down and then runs along the edge, and that's why it kind of pooled up a little bit in here, and then when I accidentally hit the fan switch right over here on this end, it went and shot a little bit of flame out the end. So don't do that. Don't make the mistake I made. First things first, safety. I'm going to turn the power off. So I'm going to turn the fan on, hear it running. I'm going to go over to the breaker box and I'm going to switch the power off for this circuit. So the next step after the power is off and verify that it is off, I'm going to take the light bulbs out. These light bulbs, they just, if you turn them, you got to rotate them counterclockwise. There we go. It will just drop right on out. I'm just putting my hand on there and just giving it a rotate, about 1/8 of a turn. Got both the bulbs out. Pull the release clip on the filter cover, remove that. Now on the corner of this plate underneath the filter cover there's 4 screws. 2 in the back in the corners, and there's also 2 in the front. I'm going to remove those 4 screws. With that 4th screw removed, this cover will just drop down and we'll put this out of the way. Now just behind the lights on the left and the right hand side there's 2 number 2 Phillips screws that hold this shroud in, and I'll remove them on both sides. You have to pardon if the light's a little poor, because when I turn the electric off it also turned off my overhead kitchen lights, so I'm just using a temporary flashlight here so we can see what we're doing. There's one, and there's the other one. Now this cover here will just drop down. You might have to lift it up and out. I'm also going to use my fluke tester here just to verify there's no power on any of these wires here, because there is a hot that does go up to the switch, which I've already identified as this gray wire. And yes, there is no power. Just double checking. It's always better to be safe than be sorry. The switch is held in by 2 screws on the back side. Looks like a couple more Phillips screws. I'm going to use a stubby number 2 Phillips screwdriver to remove them. But before I do, because these wires have different colors on them, I'm going to use my phone and I'm going to take a picture of them just to make sure they go back in the right spots. And there we go, I got a picture taken, so that way if I take the wires off and I forget which terminals they go on, I can use that as a reference. First screw out, careful not to drop it. There we go, got the second screw out. From there, the control panel should just slide back and drop down. Okay, well initially the way the heat shrink is on here, I thought these were going to be terminals that I could pull off, but exposing a little bit of the heat shrink away, I can see that these wires are actually soldered to the terminals, which is really no big deal. I'll just cut them off one by one. It's safe to do so. We have the power off. We're not worried about getting shocked. And I'll just resolder the wires onto the new switch. Pull those little bits of heat shrink off. I'll strip off just a little bit of the wire on each of them. Give me about maybe about a 1/4 inch or so. And I'll just give each wire a little twist just to make life easier, threading it through the terminals. I'm going to add some heat shrink just like the way it was, and I'll cut 5 tiny little pieces of this. And I'll take the heat shrink and I'll just slip it on each wire prior to doing the soldering. We'll slip it up on each wire. Just going to slip a rubber band up and over the wires just so that all that heat shrink there doesn't fall down while I'm trying to work. Make things a little bit easier for myself. There, that should hold the heat shrink up and out of the way. And then I'll start reconnecting my wires back into the terminals, threading them through the eyelet in the exact way they were connected on the other switch. There, I've got all the wires connected back in the proper order that they were on the other switch. So now we'll move on to soldering them back on the terminals. Made sure my tip is tinned. Try to apply not a lot of heat, just enough. We don't want to put too much heat on there because it'll melt the terminal around the plastic. Everything's soldered. I'll verify that all the solder connections are good. I don't have any loose connections, any cold solders. Everything looks good. Pull that rubber band down, clip it off. Pull our heat shrink down on each wire. And then I'll use my heat gun to shrink up the tubing. And there we go, we got the wires all reattached just like they were from the factory. From here we'll put our switch back up into place and reattach our 2 screws that hold it in place. Tighten up our screws. We'll just put our light shroud back up into place. Get those screws started here by hand. Put our light bulbs back into place. be a little tricky here. There we go. Just give it a little twist, and that locks it into place. That's one. There we go. That's the second light. Both lights are in. Then we'll put the plate in that covers up the fan. We'll get those screws started and get those in there. Okay, now that I got all 4 screws just barely started, I'll tighten them all up. Put our filter back in. And then we'll go turn the power on. Alright, so let's test it out, make sure everything works properly. Both lights are working, on and off switch just fine. Test the speeds here, that's low, medium, high, off, fixed. Saved a lot of money here today versus possibly buying a new range hood, which could be anywhere between $100 and $200, and if you didn't know how to do this fix, you would be paying somebody perhaps a couple $100 more, $200-300 to install a new range hood. So this is a savings of about $300 to $500 for the cost of $13 and change. One final note here, since I save all the manuals for everything like appliances, it made it pretty easy because I had to obtain a replacement switch, which I seen some online. They ranged anywhere from about $30 to $60 shipped to the door, and most of them, instead of being the exact replacement switch, had the leads already on them, which would require you to go inside the wiring cavity under the junction box and cut all the what they call snow caps off and crimp all new wires on. It's a little bit more work. So $30 to $60 for other switches I've seen, like, you know, Brones or Newtone replacement switches. Since I saved the manual and I referenced it, inside the manual they have the control switch listed as a QHR 106. They have a 1-800 number up at the top for parts, so I gave them a call figuring I'll check, see how much they want for the switch. They actually said the switch was free and all I had to do was pay the shipping, which was the $18 Canadian, $13.32 out of my wallet, and got the same switch. Now the switch here also has some identifiers on it as SC706. It's made by a company, I can't pronounce the name, BAOHEZKEN. Looks like a 4-amp switch in case somebody wants to obtain the right type of keyboard switch here, but you'd have to pay attention. It looks like there's some of the switches are longer, some might have 4, some might have 5, so you'd have to do some shopping around to make sure you get the right switch for your model. But you should be able to attain the right switch part number right off the back of it, but if you pull it out first. So that's how I got everything done here. Did it myself, pretty simple, saved hundreds of dollars. Hope you enjoyed watching the video, and as always, thanks for watching.